بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله يا ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا أما بعد. We wanted to begin with Surah Al-Mu'minun, and this surah is characterized as being revealed in Mecca, roughly during the middle stage of the Meccan period. And these stages, the Meccan stages, are usually characterized by levels of resistance to the dawah. And so in the middle stage, there was some conflict that was taking place between Quraysh and the Prophet ﷺ. But the level of resistance that they were waging against the dawah had not become tyrannical or violent. This is what you begin to see in the later stages. So one of the characteristics of the middle stage of prophethood in Mecca is the level of violence and resistance coming from Quraysh is not to an extent that is suffocating or is directed towards attacking the believers physically or towards using tactics that are falling in the same vein, meaning like boycotting and barring people from access to things that are necessary for life. One of the comments that's made with regard to the background of this surah is that there was a famine taking place in Mecca. There was a famine taking place in Mecca, and in this regard, you have, hold on one second, people. You have this sense of reference to it in Ayat 75. Thus we were to have mercy upon them and remove whatever harm is upon them. And so that harm is being pointed to as being some evidence for this reality. And this is supported by some textual prophetic hadith evidences that give a basis or give some standing to this opinion. And they're said to be authentic. On my part, that needs some more research. But here it says, according to a tradition related by Urwa bin Zubair, Umar radiallahu anhu, who had embraced Islam by that time, said, this surah was revealed in my presence, and I myself observed the state of the Prophet ﷺ during his revelation. When the revelation ended, the Prophet ﷺ remarked, on this occasion 10 such ayat have been sent down to me, that one who measures up to them will surely go to paradise. Then he recited the initial ayat of this surah. So the first 10 ayat, they hold weight with regard to the characteristics of the believers in clarifying the path of entry into Jannah. Right? And so one of the ideas is that this surah, its central topic is da'wah, calling the people to Tawheed. The summary point for ayat 1 through 11 is that the people that have accepted the message from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ have started acquiring characteristics, qualities of character that reflect the reality of Iman. And this embodiment of these characteristics becomes a practical proof of the truth of the message. In other words, the effects of the message on people, the way they conduct themselves, and how it is that these characteristics that are the characteristics of Iman, which will be mentioned in the surah, or at least are mentioned, we can say in another way, in the first 10 ayat or so. These characteristics, when acted upon, create a transformational change in the society, and in this case, in the community of believers. Interestingly enough, Surah Al-Mu'minun, it pertains to the reality of Iman in the widest sense of the meaning, but it is addressed to the group. It's addressed to the group. And so some of these ayats, they give this sense in the reading. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح المؤمنون. So here the descriptive is of the believers, not as individuals, but as a group. And then the plural is used again. الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون. الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون. All of these concepts brought up in ayat 2 are concepts that deal with the plural, deal with the group, the characteristics of the group. Truly the believers shall realize everlasting success is how the surah initiates. And then when we go to ayat 2, who are they? The ones who attain humility in their prayers. Who are they? The ones, moreover, who unfailingly turn away from any laghu. I don't like to use the term vile talk only, because one of the interpretations of the term al-laghu, الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ, that they turn back or they reject al-laghu. And in this case, laghu is translated as vile talk. Vile talk. But in some tafsir, they say that it's any unbeneficial speech or action. And then, once again, the plural is invoked. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ. And then who are they again? وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. And then that reality of who the believers are is brought up very clearly in a number of ayat. Descriptives are given of a collective, the community of believers. Right? And this sort of ultimately, like Dr. Ahmed Zaki says, declares the ultimate success of the believers in one God without a partner, and that describes the irreproachable standard of their spiritual and moral virtues. It's a blueprint, a model, a mirroring, a standard bearer of who the believers are as a community, not as individuals alone, isolated, atomized, but as individuals that come together and form a community of belief and practice, rooted in Iman. Rooted in Iman. So they're the ones who they have humility in their salah. They're the ones that turn away from a lagwu. And a lagwu is anything that is unbeneficial in speech or in action. Most of the times it's translated as that which is unbeneficial in speech. And there maybe could be wisdom in that translation, and that speech ends up becoming behavior at a certain point. Who are the believers? They're the ones who they give the right of zakah. And some of the ulama, and I mentioned this before some time past, that zakah here can mean purification and it can mean giving to the poor, right? But it doesn't automatically fall into the idea of meaning the pillar of zakah, although that meaning is given to it later on, because the ayat, the plural of ayat, the ayat pertaining to the establishment of zakah as a rukn or as a cornerstone of Islam haven't been revealed yet at this point. But here also, the idea of chastity and the idea of marriage, the idea of channeling the sexual desire, relationships, family, though the ones, moreover, who are vigilant as to the chastity of their secret parts. And so this has everything to do with the foundation of the family. And so these are people who not only have certain values with regard to their prayers and to the purification of themselves and the way that they speak and act and the giving of charity to others. But they are people who are focused on the idea of family. And once again, these underlying concepts are concepts, or we can say these underlying values, better said, are values which support the foundation of a community. Values which are support the foundation of a community. And then we move forward a couple of ayat into the surah after the ones that we read. And the believers are the ones, moreover, who are ever observant of their trust and their covenant. And this is one of the realities of success, that which is entrusted is something that is sacred, is upheld, is preserved, right? And your word also has weight. And in addition, one of the characteristics of the believers is that they're ever vigilant in keeping to their prayers, the established prayers. Some of the ulama, they were of the opinion that this pertained to other than just the al-maktuba or the legislated obligations of the prayers. And some have considered, like Imam Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, considered that opinion to be weak. So this pertains to that which is established as far as an obligation, the prayers, that they uphold those. And here is mentioned as a characteristics of the believers on the whole. It is what identifies them. Then here it says that they're the ones that will be the inheritors. And what is it that they inherit? الَّذِينَ يَرِثُونَ الْفِرْدَوْسِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. So here, the inheritance is coming back to inheriting Jannah. Jannah is what is inherited, and then their state there is that therein they shall abide forever. So the interesting thing is that these first 10 ayat, they teach us what are the realities, the boundaries, the cornerstones of Islam. There's some ideas that come to the fore that I wanted to share from a tafsir which is attributed to Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi, which in reality is a collection of his opinions from various works. But here, the idea of khushu' is tied into the reality of success of the believers, or at least it follows up the first ayat, that the believers are those who have entry into Jannah. They have entry into Jannah. So the idea of the salah tied into the reality of Jannah is the first thing that comes up, and the state of the believer in salah. So here khushu', or what some have translated as humility, is the idea of being focused on the place of sujood with your eyes. And it was related that Imam Ibn Sirin and others have said that the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, they would lift their eyes to the sky in the salah, and they would look to their right and their left until this ayah was revealed. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. That the believers are indeed successful, and this success is that they have entered into Jannah. Who are they? That in this world, in their salah, they obtained the state of humility before Allah wa ta'ala, which is characterized in the word khushu'. And khushu' is then identified as placing the eyes placing the eyes in such a way that you're looking to the spot in which you're going to prostrate. Prior to that, people were doing other things. So one of the characteristics of the believers is this stillness in salah and this focus and paying attention to the reality of the salah itself, which it demands a connection with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And I mentioned already some of the points with regard to the reality of marriage and the sacredness of marriage, that the believers hold marriage to be something that's sacred. And here we use the term marriage to be equivalent to the sex act. And so that sex act is worked out within the context of a contractual agreement, marriage as we know it and customarily. And that's something that we should prepare our children for, and we should work and strive to protect ourselves, because the reality of marriage is that it's a fortress of protection from that which can do us harm in the world, from desire and otherwise. We mentioned already that here the reality of the prayer is brought up to the fore, right? And is brought up again but in a different way. In the first instance, the idea of humility in the prayer, and then here is brought up وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ يُحَافِظُونَ, that the salah is preserved, is established and preserved. So the state of the salah was talked about before, and now the continuity and the upholding of the salah is one of the mainstays of the believers. We mentioned already the issue of zakat. There's no direct, at this point, conversation that is brought up, at least in this section of what is attributed to the tafsir of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, which is very interesting because that supports the idea that zakah is purification. But he does go into the reality of salah with some depth, or at least what is collected from his sayings, and the idea of being of an awakened heart in the salah with concentration is extremely important. So with that, people, we end. The characteristics of the believers is their belief in the unseen and their humility in salah, their preservation of the salah, their engaging in purification of the heart, their giving of charity to the people, and they're maintaining themselves pure with regard to the sex act, and they're upholding the institution of family. All of these characteristics are characteristics of the believers, along with them holding to their word and upholding and preserving their contracts. This is what gives stability to a community, and this is what protects it from corruption, whether it's economic corruption or corruption spawning from desire. And this is what keeps the heart in check, because after all, the connection is with Allah wa Ta'ala in spirit and in practice. Inna salata tanha anil fahsha wal munkar. So the salah is that which prevents, when it's properly established, wrongdoing actions, and that which is abominable, and that which is rejected, and that which is considered to be problematic by people of sound heart and iman. With this we end. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.